Well, hello everybody. So my name is Jesse. I am your virtual adventure guide here with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. And thank you all for your patience. Sometimes when you're broadcasting from the middle of the Pacific Ocean, you lose connection for a few seconds. So I appreciate you all sticking around today. Now, over the summer, we got the chance to hang out with the Ocean Observatories Initiative, which is an amazing program and the biggest summer session we ever had in our history. So thank you guys all for coming out in full force. Now, I know we've got some new fans in our audience today, and so whether you're live with us or on YouTube, I want to note that if you are new to Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. So welcome in our second big week. We've done everything from join rowers crossing the Pacific Ocean to talking with wildlife filmmakers from National Geographic and so much more, and you can find out all of our programs at exploringbytheseat.com. Now, I mentioned this Ocean Observatories Initiative, and this is the largest effort to understand our oceans and the changing conditions in them the planet's ever seen. Basically, we have 7 amazing relays around the oceans of the globe, and today we are getting the chance to hang out on the Endurance 17 expedition off the Oregon coast, understanding some of the stuff that's changing and happening on a big upwelling coming up the Pacific coast. So these are really special parts of the ocean, and there's no better guide to what's happening there than Chief Scientist John Fram, who's joining us on board the RV Thomas G. Thompson today. He's going to explain a little bit about what the expedition's all about, and then we're going to dive in with all of your questions. So, John, thank you so much for joining us today, man, and take us away.
Great. Well, it's good to see you, and thank you for hosting. My name is John Fram. I'm an oceanography professor at Oregon State University, and I manage the endurance array portion of the Ocean Observatories Initiative. As Jesse said, it's one of several arrays that the National Science Foundation has funded to have sustained observations of the ocean. So I'm on the research ship Thomas D. Thompson. You can see the ship behind me. We're about to leave the dock in the next couple hours. And so let me first show you where we are, and then we can talk about where we're going. So I'm going to turn the camera around, and I'll show you.
Cool.
There we are. So this is the back of the ship. You can see the equipment that we're about to put in the water. And then let me show you a little bit around the dock where we are. So we're at the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration's dock in Newport, Oregon. And this is NOAA is the acronym. And so you can see behind me a couple of research vessels operated by NOAA that are used to study fisheries. And then if we look a little bit more to the right, we can see Oregon State University's dock and its research vessel, the Oceanus. It's another National Science Foundation vessel that's operated by the university here. So the ship I'm on is operated by the University of Washington, and we're kind of guests on the ship for the next couple weeks. And so this is a lot of research vessels in one place. I think you probably have to go, I don't know, maybe to San Diego to see a collection of this many research vessels. Newport is a really special place, and so we're going to see, and these other vessels that are doing work unrelated to us are also going to be going to see as well. I can look across the bay here, and this is the harbor where the commercial fishing vessels dock, and some of these you probably would recognize from the show Deadliest Catch, Dungeon Cove. Those vessels do their work out of here. So every winter when the Dungeness crab fishery opens, the vessels here will go out and catch crab. And they make the most money of the year in those first few weeks of the crab season. So no matter how rough the seas are, they go out and catch crabs. That's why it makes for really good television, because they go out in rough seas. For us, we don't do that. So we're on a research vessel, and what we do, and I'll go back to a picture of me, what we do is we put equipment in water in an easier time of year to go to sea, at the end of September right now. And we put equipment in the water that is tough enough to collect data throughout the winter, including the deadliest catch times of years. and then we go next spring. We'll pick up the equipment and replace it with a fresh set of equipment. We do that every 6 months. So this is our 17th coastal endurance survey cruise. So we've been going since the end of 2013, and we hope to be doing this project for decades to come. Collecting long-term observing data is really important. It helps us see long-term changes in climate change. It also helps us capture events, so like storms, or right now we're in a La Nina period, and so you need a permanent presence in the ocean in order to capture events and to see long-term changes. And so, let's see.
I was actually going to ask John, so you talked about going every 6 months to do this. Is the devices that are out in the ocean, are they sending you data all the time, or do you need to physically go and literally like take them out of the water to be able to collect all that information from what you're putting out there?
Okay, so I didn't quite hear everything you said. Something's going on in the dock here. I think what you asked was, do we have to like go collect the data all the time? And no, all these things have satellite links or cell phones on them, so they call and send their data home in real time every day. And this is important for a lot of reasons. So it's important for other scientists who are using these data to know, hey, there's an event like a low oxygen event happening, and then they can go and mobilize their crews at that time. So having data available in real time is really important. It's also important to have the data available for everyone because it's expensive and difficult to collect these data. And so if you're going to go to the trouble to do it, you might as well share it with everyone. So everything we collect goes on online immediately, and then we put the data in a form that scientists find useful. We try to work with scientists to help them understand, so we can understand how to provide the data in a way that's most useful to them.
Yeah.
And if I can make another point about that, another reason why it's really important to share data is to give everyone an equal opportunity to have access to these data. So like when I was first starting out as a scientist, before I had gray hair, if I wanted data collected near where I was working, I'd have to find the scientist who was collecting those data, knock on their door or call them, or have my advisor call them. And it's not really a fair or efficient way to do science. What we're doing is making data available to everyone so everyone has equal access to it.
This is a really important thing, and something that a lot of our kids will be learning about in class for the very first time. Is even when I was a kid, the expectation was that scientists did work and kept it to themselves and published it in expensive journals. And so we're starting to see this huge change where people are more willing, and in fact it's sort of expected, to share it widely so that everyone can benefit from this. So I'm really glad that you guys are sort of embodying that in this expedition. Now, out the back of the ship, when you had the camera turned around, you showed us some of these big things that are set to go in the water. So what are they measuring? Is it, you talked about low oxygen. Are they measuring heat? Are they measuring pressure? Like, what is actually being studied in terms of this data that you're looking for?
Sure. So let me turn the camera around and I can kind of give you a tour of what we're doing.
Fantastic.
All right. Let's see if this works again. There we go.
Perfect.
All right. So first off, everything you see here is going to be in the ocean in the next week off the coast of Washington. And then we're going to collect the identical things that we put in the water 6 months ago and take them back to the dock here in Newport. And then the following week, we'll have another set of similar equipment that we'll deploy off the coast of Oregon and then collect what we had deployed 6 months ago. All right, so what are we putting in the water and what are we measuring? So one of the things we do is we deploy these large surface buoys. And this buoy, it's about 20 feet tall and about 8,000 pounds. So it's pretty large. And it's you can see the wind turbines and solar panels on it. So it's able to power the instruments continuously. The instruments you see on here are the on the top, there's the meteorological instruments like the wind speed and rain and the light levels. We get a lot of fog here in Oregon, so it's important to measure the light so you can understand the productivity that you measure in the ocean. It measures pressure, as you mentioned. It also has a bunch of different ways to telemetry the data to shore so that we can be sure that we're going to get everything to shore. And then also it allows us to program the instruments if there are issues and troubleshoot. It collects enough power to send data all the way down to the seafloor. So it can look over here and you can see the big blue rectangle. Those are the instruments that sit on the seafloor, and they measure similar things. Throughout the water column, we have instruments throughout the water column, things like velocity, temperature, salinity. We look at oxygen, like I mentioned. We look at things like ocean acidification, so we measure pH and carbon dioxide levels. We measure nutrients like nitrate, and then some biological things as well, phytoplankton, chlorophyll A concentration, and zooplankton concentration.
Yeah. So, John, on the Ocean Observatory's website, so I brought this up already once, you can see that the Endurance Array is just one of 7 in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Why is it important to have different arrays in different places? Like, why have one in the middle of the North Atlantic near Greenland? Your one is off Oregon. We've got one off the southern tip of South America. What's the reason for this? Just different ocean conditions in different places, or trying to compare and contrast what's going on? What's the deal?
Well, so each of the arrays has multiple purposes. So we're trying to supply data that can be useful to many scientists, but I think they each have a main focus. So the one in the North Atlantic, like you mentioned, that one, I think its main idea is to measure it's part of a larger array of moorings that are measuring the exchange between the Arctic Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean that drives the global thermohaline circulation, kind of the main circulation in the ocean. Our array here is in a region of coastal upwelling, and these exist along the eastern boundary of all the oceans, and they are where a large fraction of the world's fish are caught. It's a really so a highly productive area. And so these narrow strips of ocean on the eastern boundary of each of the oceans is super important. And the reason why it's so productive is that nutrient-rich waters from deep and offshore are upwelled up to the surface right near the shore. And so the nutrient waters are when light hits the nutrient waters, we get phytoplankton, and then fisheries like the crab fishery that I mentioned earlier. So that's why we're here. And then Newport in particular, where we're working, has been a place where people have been doing oceanographic research for decades. And so by having the Ocean Observatories Initiative place an array here, we're able to put it in this multi-decadal context and build on the research that's been done for years. And each of the arrays is in a location where we can build on generations of science.
Fantastic. What a great answer, John. I have shared in the YouTube chat and the StreamYard chat a little bit more on upwelling for classes that might not be familiar with it, because it really is a fascinating and very easy to describe scientific way that we can understand why we have these rich fisheries, like for our Dungeness crab right off the East Coast. I want to get into some deeper questions in a minute, but I love this one from YouTube for you, John, first. David wants to know why the blue paint. We've got the blue deep sea things. You've got the blue buoys. What's the deal? Is there a reason for that?
Sure. So the blue paint is to reduce biofouling. So because we're doing this work in really productive places, gosh, anything you put in the ocean is going to get covered with algae and barnacles. this blue anti-fouling paint, we've experimented with a few kinds over the years. So this is doesn't have any copper in it, and it's kind of as environmental friendly anti-fouling paint as is on the market. And so we paint these before they go into ocean each time, and it allows us to extend our deployments to 6 months, so we don't have to exchange the equipment as often. The stuff you see that's not painted, it's going to be in deeper waters, so you don't have to worry about biofouling in those locations.
Fantastic! What a cool thing. We've covered this in some ship programs before, talking about sort of the hulls of ships, where if you don't have materials like this, or whether it's the design of it or the paint of it, you'll end up with literal tons of living material that starts growing on it. So what a neat innovation for doing some science out in the deep sea. Very cool, John. I'm curious, when you're out on the ship, so you guys are leaving fairly soon, how long are you actually on these expeditions, and how big a crew is there? One of the things that we always love to feature on ocean research vessels is that it's usually a crew from a lot of different countries working together, a lot of scientists that have otherwise never met. And I've always liked to highlight that collaborative aspect to it. So do tell.
Sure. So I think our collaboration really comes on shore. Our group that we're bringing to see the scientists from OOI, there are a dozen of us. And I think all but one of us works for the program. We have a graduate student from Oklahoma State University as well here with us. And so we try to be as fast and efficient as possible. We once we're at sea, there's like nonstop things going in and out of the water. And then we put the data online so that scientists from everywhere can work together and collaborate. It's not one of these cruises where we do a lot of processing of water samples at sea. So these ships have amazing laboratories for people to process data, process water at sea. And sometimes we bring people on who have their independent projects to do work, but mostly we're just trying to get in and out as quickly as possible. So there's a dozen of us from OOI, from Ocean Observatories Initiative, and then there's 20 people who work for the ship for the University of Washington, and it takes about 20 people to operate one of these large research vessels.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And so you talked earlier that this year's a La Nina year. I'm just curious in general, what are you finding when you're out there? Are there big changes that you've been able to document so far in the sort of early stages of these missions? Are there things that we're recognizing that are happening, maybe from some past expeditions that you might have been on, or past things funded by the NSF? Like, I'd like to know where it's at from a person who's actually a lead scientist on this.
Sure. So this is a year with high nutrient waters, great fishing this year. And I think one neat thing we saw this year is this spring we had it rained through really late into the year, so all the way up until July 4th. It was raining, which, as someone who lives in Oregon, it's kind of tough. But anyway, so a lot of rain. And then another thing that happened this year is that upwelling started really late, and so we had all this water coming down from rivers, and we had very little wind. And so the plume from the Columbia River, which is like really far north from here, it came out and went all the way down to this area in Newport and washed over our moorings. And so we could see this lens of fresh water from, over 100 miles away. And this happened last time in 2011, where we had some like test moorings out there. And so now we have the full array out there. And so we can kind of see the same event, but now have more interesting data to put that kind of infrequent plume in context.
Fantastic. I'm so curious, John, how do you end up in a role like yours? Like, what do you, for students that are in grade 7, grade 9 today, if they wanted to end up in a role where they're the lead scientist in an amazing research vessel, what do they have to do? What did you do?
Sure. So, all right, when I was that age, I was fortunate enough to have an older sister. Well, she's still my older sister. I had an older sister who was a scientist. And so the summer after my 9th grade year, I spent a month doing field work for her, and then I went to like her lab afterwards and processed the samples with her, and I kind of got to see what it was like being a scientist. And I work on completely different stuff than she does, but it was kind of at that time that I thought, yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to be a scientist. And um, in terms of doing exactly what I'm doing here, it was many years later until I kind of came upon this. I was actually a teacher for a while, and so I had this neat opportunity to develop lessons for middle school and high school students, and in that process, I do a lot of reading, and so some of those books inspired me to go in the direction that I'm in. And then, gosh, it wasn't until I think 2002 that I was at a conference where I met the person who ended up kind of coming up with the idea for the endurance array. And he was presenting about something that was totally different. And I thought it was really cool. And so I talked to him about it. And then later, I've now ended up working on the project that he, envisioned that later.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, I love that you began with this sort of hands-on experience, and this is something that we hear from scientists and explorers, really, regardless of field, whether people are in oceans or space or conservation. So much of the sort of expertise in the world starts with people that are just passionate about something and take the opportunity to volunteer, get involved, talk to someone who already has that expertise. And so I always like to encourage our students, if you're keen on something, talk to a scientist, go to a university. These people don't bite. They're excited. They're excited to share their knowledge with you. They're excited to give you opportunities. I mean, in many cases, people like John had these sort of experiences when they were younger, and they've translated it into something really, really special. So I love that answer. Our 3 live classes, if you guys have any questions, turn on your cameras. Let me know you're still good to go. I can start coming to our live classes, Mr. Charoni, Ms. Colgan's class, Ms. Corson's class in just a second. If you're on YouTube, you want to share some more questions, we'd love to hear from you as well. So feel free to type in the chat. But John, I want to know, how many expeditions have you been on? This is number 17 for endurance. Where have you been? Have you been on other times on the Thomas G. Thompson, or what's your career story of travel?
Oh, so before I worked on this project, I'd never been on one of these large vessels. I think previous to this, I worked on observatory off the coast of Hawaii that was in really shallow water. So we could go and scuba dive down our instruments and place everything that way. So it was a really different thing. And to come out here and to be on this like giant ship with these moorings that are, 8,000 pounds, and it was a really cool experience. I think I didn't really, I didn't really think that I'd end up doing this stuff, but I, was interested in oceanography and developed a range of skills that ended up being useful for this opportunity when it came along. I think that's one of the things that is it's hard to communicate to me that opportunities are sometimes rare, and you don't end up doing exactly what you planned many years ago. Yeah. So like at this point I can give you kind of a clear explanation of, oh yeah, this is how we ended up here. But there's a lot of false starts and a lot of things that maybe didn't work out, and it just I knew I wanted to do science, and I was really kind of amazed by observing science and how you could collect data that could then get reused over and over again by many people. And so this project where we get to collect stuff that these data will be available long after I retire is really, that I think it really drew me to this.
I love that so many people like you sort of end up in these opportunities in fits and starts. There's no set path. Hindsight is very much 2020 when it comes to, you get this incredible opportunity. It all looks preordained, but taking those light opportunities, talking to people, meeting people at conferences, all those things really lead to these exciting adventures. So I'm so glad you answered it that way. John, I want to head to Mr. Charoni's class. 3-4s want to know a couple things. So if you guys want to turn on your microphone and camera, you can share there. And if not, that's fine too. I can take them from the chat. But Mr. Charoni, if you want to pop in, you're welcome to. While we're waiting, I'll share the first question. Ayush wants to know, how do the machines measure carbon dioxide? For someone who's coming to this for the first time, younger classes, how do you actually measure the gas in the water or in the air?
Okay, so there's 2 instruments, one that measures the carbon dioxide in the air, and then one that measures the carbon dioxide in the water. And then if you measure those two things, and then you measure um, you also need the temperature and salinity of the water, uh, and you can measure the wind speed across the air surface, then you can measure the exchange of carbon dioxide between the air and the water. Okay, so how do they work? So this is a hard one to do live. Okay. Um,
No
I
pressure.
can sort of answer that, but I'm not sure I can answer that in uh, an easy to understand way.
It is a tricky one. How do advanced scientific instruments work for grade 3 students? No pressure. Um, so, I mean, I'm trying to think actually in my own experience, but you talked about the impact of books when you were growing up and inspiring you to get into this. I'm not sure I've ever seen any easy description of this. So, this is a bit of a tricky question. Geez, John. I mean, when you taught middle school, was there any explanation you used then for this sort of thing, or this is more
Well,
advanced
so
level?
look, I think that uh, it's okay to be stumped when you're live, and I can't explain this, but I kind of want to do this. Uh, let me explain something else to you that is
Please
also interesting,
go for it.
and I will be. Let me show you something else, and then we'll get back to the carbon dioxide question in a moment. Okay, so uh, what you can see in the frame here are these uh, two gliders, and they're about 6 feet long. And these, I think, are like one of the stars of the endurance array. Um, one of the challenges that we have is that we're measuring a really large area of the ocean, like it's half the size of Oregon. And and you think, like in Oregon, there's hundreds of scientists and field stations all over the place, and there's only a few research groups out in the coastal ocean with a permanent presence. And so these gliders, they go about 10 miles a day, and they allow us to kind of cover the whole area. Um, and they're really efficient, so they can last for 3 months on one battery. Um, and so that's one of the other platforms that we put in the water. So there's 6 locations where we have kind of every different kind of instrument that we have, and then we have these gliders that cover the whole area that we're doing research, and they're just measuring a few things like temperature and salinity and oxygen, and chlorophyll concentration. Um, yeah, so
That's
that's
great.
another thing.
I was looking it up while you were sharing that. If there was any easy way to describing this, and like it's over my head, so it is some complicated science for how some of these high tech toys work. But that is why we have people like you on the case. And so I love stump the scientist questions. Way to go, Mr. Charoni's class. Now, you've talked about the wildlife off these coasts, all the fisheries that exist there. And so I love this question from Jocelyn. She wants to know if you've had any funny interactions with animals, or in general, when you're on the ship, are you seeing things off the side of the ship? Are you seeing things when you go to these sites to drop off the sensor arrays? What's going on?
Yeah. So yes, we do. So I think that our biggest challenge is the sea lions that sit on our buoys, and so we have to harden our buoys so that a several hundred-pound sea lion can, roll over the solar panels without breaking them. We hide the cables so they can't chew on the cables, and then they're protected animals, and so we need to be respectful to them and not have anything hazardous on the buoys, and then stay off from the buoys. You can't approach too close to them, because of the Marine Mammal Protection Act.
Yes, they're a pretty sizable animal. I don't know for some of our students, if you've never seen a sea lion, they can get pretty hefty. And so this is not something you take lightly as you approach one every day. Great question, guys. Miss Colgan's class in Oregon, if you guys have a question for us, let us know in the chat. Miss Corson's class in Langley, again, we'd like to hear some stories from you guys, so do let us know. Dawn, as an oceanographer, what is your specialty? I'm really curious what like, is there something very niche that you do, or do you do a broad range of oceanographical science?
I think my specialty would be coastal fluid mechanics, so how the coastal waters move around and mix. Um, and so um, that's one of the kind of unique things here is that we have instruments that measure all kinds of stuff, and we have to rely on the expertise of the whole group of people that we go to sea with. Yeah.
I love this. This is something that we've had featured a lot on research vessels, on Antarctic stories, and space exploration. It's just the idea that everyone has different roles. Sometimes they cross over a little bit, but you'll have people that are real specialists in various fields, and so you get this collaborative atmosphere that is so special to the scientific enterprise. And I love when we get the chance to highlight that. All right. A question from YouTube. Have you ever lost one of your gliders? So do these tools ever get swamped by sea lions or sucked down in hurricanes or what's going on?
Yes. So
oh no.
We do our best, and so we try to put everything has a beacon on it, and we do our best not to lose things. But yes, if you've seen Deadliest Catch, you know kind of what the conditions are off the coast of Oregon and Washington, and it's really hard to make things tough enough to survive the winter. Now, we've had gliders, for example, have trouble, and then we have, we call fishing vessels or research vessels up and down the coast to help us out. So we've had gliders we picked up in Southern Oregon. We've had gliders we picked up off the coast of Vancouver Island, and it's been really helpful to, other research scientists. They know what can happen out there, and they're happy to help, and we help others as well whenever somebody's equipment goes adrift, because you spend all this time and effort on these, and you really want the data and the equipment back.
It's always good, of course, when they do wash up somewhere where other people can pick them up. We've had a scientist before who had a ray that was underneath the water and the line cut, so it literally sank to the bottom of the ocean with no means of getting it. So that's sort of a worst case scenario, but I'm glad to hear some.
A little bit of that has happened before. I think the thing that's washed up furthest away is we had some equipment wash up just north of Ketchikan, Alaska.
Wow.
So during winter, there's obviously a lot of rain here in Oregon and Washington, and because of the Coriolis effect, those river waters kind of come out in the coastal ocean and go north up the coast, and so there's kind of a coastal river during the winter. And so if anything goes adrift in the winter near shore, it's going to shoot straight north, and that's why this thing that we lost in October ended up in Alaska, and fishermen called us in February after we sent someone up there to retrieve it and return it to us.
I mean, it's a good way to make new friends, I suppose, but not ideal from the scientific perspective. We've got some great questions coming in our chat. So Miss Colgan and Miss Jessica's class in Oregon, they want to know, do you take any data on salmon runs specifically, and do you have information on how the plumes affect marine animals there?
So we don't specifically measure salmon, but certainly scientists have used the offshore ocean conditions to understand how well salmon are surviving in the ocean. It's actually it's amazing. So once the salmon get to rivers and streams, there are so many scientists measuring how each of them pass. It seems to me everywhere. Whereas when they're out in the ocean, there's a lot of unknown because there's so many places that they could be. So people do use our data and other data that other scientists collect to model salmon populations.
Yep. I want to stress too, if people are really keen on salmon runs, we've done a program before with a group called Kluane National Park in the Yukon, talking all about salmon. So you can check that out on our YouTube channel, just like you can check out John's program after the fact as well. So just a quick plug there. We've been getting a lot of variations on a question of how long are you specifically on the ship? Do you sleep on board the ship? Is it a multi-day expedition, or are you out and back in one day? Everyone wants to know.
Yes. Okay. So we spend about a week at a time, and then we come back to the dock. We're limited by how much stuff we can stick on the ship, and so we fill the ship with moorings and other equipment, put all of it in the water, recover equipment. Takes us about a week, and then we come back to port and unload and reload. So some of the other parts of OOI, they go further offshore. So like in the North Atlantic, the group in the Erminger Sea, it takes them, a week to get to the field site. So they
Wow.
spend a lot longer at sea than we do. Additionally, so we do these big cruises twice a year that are a little over 2 weeks. But the gliders and some of the other equipment has to get turned more often. So we go out on small boats on average twice a month during the rest of the year to help maintain the rest of the infrastructure.
Fantastic. Great. There you go. So for our YouTube groups and our live groups, I appreciate the multitude of questions all leading to that. We got one more from Miss Corson's class. How long does it take to study one weather event? So say you've got a hurricane, say you've got something like a La Nina event. How long are you collecting data from this? How long are you using this in any serious way? Like what's going on?
So it's hard to know in advance, like how long you need to measure something and how many times you need to measure similar events to make an inference. And that's part of why it's important to have a permanent presence in the ocean and to be measuring all the time. I think when I started as a scientist, I thought we'd be designing experiments, testing hypotheses, and being, doing everything in that kind of tight, pre-planned way. But what we do in observing science is we measure things on many time scales, and then it's kind of only afterwards that someone can develop and test hypotheses sometimes. So that's part of why we're out here, that for certain things I could say, yeah, this is how long we need to be here, but something else will come up. So it's important just to measure all the time.
Yep, fantastic. Go on. Time flies and you're having fun. I told you this would be the fastest 45 minutes of your life. And so I'm curious, for our students that are live and on YouTube, is there a last message you want to share with them about the work that you guys are doing as part of the Ocean Observatories Initiative? Anything that you're going to be experiencing on this specific expedition? What can we leave our kids to take home with today?
Well, first off, we have a lot on our website, so including things that I may have forgotten right now. So please go to our website to learn more. But then I also want to point out, as we mentioned, there are many folks working here. There's some people like myself who are scientists and went, to school for that. But there's all kinds of different folks that it takes to make this observatory work.
I love this. And this is something that we're starting to see more and more of in our talks. And so whether you want to be a cook or a mechanic or a technician or a scientist, there are roles for you on expeditions like this. Increasingly journalists, photographers, people that can help document and share these expeditions, business people, lawyers. I mean, really, no matter what your interests are, if you are keen to end up in a role like this where you're part of something bigger, you get to contribute to the scientific enterprise in a huge way, there are exciting opportunities for you. So John, I can't think of a better message than that. I want to say a big thank you to you and the entire Ocean Observatories team. I hope you guys have a marvelous expedition. And for our classes joining us in Oregon and British Columbia, across Ontario and more, not to mention our YouTube friends, thank you all so much for being here and have a wonderful rest of the day. Bye for now, everybody.